My son Andre was killed in November 2009. He was 20 years old, beautiful inside and out, and was sure he was going to break into the music industry in a big way. The last time I spoke with him, he was all excited about entering a local music competition and had set his sights on taking it all the way to the top. Then, on the eve of Friday, November 27th, my husband and I were sitting at home watching television when we call every parent dread.
Greetings, welcome to the Entrepreneur Secrets Podcast, the show that uncovers the secrets to win with books beyond book sales and dominate entrepreneurship. Through exclusive author interviews, stories, and must have resources, you will discover some of the secrets and strategies to thrive with books and generate lasting income. I invite you to become an entrepreneur ambassador and join me in my mission to raise up 10,000 Caribbean entrepreneurs by 2030. Spread the word about the podcast and encourage more people to increase their impact and income with books beyond book sales. Without further ado, let's get into the show. It's another episode of the Entrepreneur Secrets Podcast, and it's Child Month. And so we're going to be focusing on children and parents. And today we have a very special topic to deal with. It's somber, but it is so important. It's about surviving the loss of a child. And in the interview segment, you're going to hear from Lorraine Jones Lawrence, who is a leading advocate for grieving children in Jamaica. And she courageously shares her story of losing her beloved son, Andre. And so, for the past 2 decades, she has organized several seminars and workshops to sensitize educators and professional caregivers to the complexities of childhood grief. And she draws on her own experiences, her training in bereavement support, and offers guidance and comfort to those navigating the challenging path of parental grief. She's a member of the Association of Death Education and Counseling, ADEC. And You Gotta Get Up, Surviving the Loss of a Child is her debut book. And it is just so rich and full of resources to help any parent who is grieving the loss of a child, whether that's an adult child or a younger child. And so, without further ado, let's welcome Lorraine to the show.
Thanks, Ruth.
All right. So, talk to us. What is your favorite thing about Jamaica?
I honestly would have to say the warmth of the Jamaican people. I get that from persons who visit Jamaica. I get that when I travel and come back to Jamaica. It's just a different feeling. And I think, you can get pretty much everything else in Jamaica everywhere else, but you can't get Jamaicans. We're just really a warm and beautiful people, and we just need to realize that.
I love that. So, we are more than sand,
Oh, yeah.
sea, and jerk chicken.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. All right. So, talk to us about your author journey. How did that come about?
I'm not even sure where or when it came to me that I needed to write this book. I've never been somebody who wanted to write a book. I know that people say everybody has a book in them and all that, but I was pretty sure there was no book in me. And I write for a living, and I thought, that's as much as I just want to write, get paid, and go home or whatever. So I've never really had that ambition, and I'm not really quite sure when the idea for the book came to mind, and but I just remember it as a very strong urging that something that I needed to do, and I needed to do it because I have the skills to do it. So I did quite a bit of a Jonah kind of journey where I tried to ignore it and hope it would go away. And I remember night, it was March 2017, I was lying on my couch, and for some reason, like I think I felt kind of like an itching and on my left breast, and I touched it and I felt a lump. And I remember the first thing that came to mind, and I actually got up and wrote this down, and I said to the effect that this might or it might not be cancerous, and it might or might not be, the beginning of the end of my life. But the one thing that I do regret is that I haven't gotten this book done. I remember, thinking that that would, I would, this would be the major regret that I would have. It turned out to be cancer. And so I did a year of basically, taking care of myself, going through treatment, surgery, and so on. But then I also started really seriously putting my notes together. Interestingly enough, I have to say this book pretty much wrote itself, because every time I'd sit with it, the words would come, the references would come. I would get everything I needed, to make a point. And so I really realized that this was something that was just not me. It wasn't a vanity project, definitely. It was something that needed to be out there, and I was the one who was asked to stand in the place and get it done. So, yeah, that's really how this started.
That is truly a powerful story. Wow. Not only have you survived the loss of a child, you're saying at one point you were also diagnosed with cancer and had to do treatment. Talk to me about that, because last year there were multiple lumps in both breasts. One of them in particular was very hard, and as I googled and listened to other cancer stories, and I also had that kind of thing, if this is cancerous, what would I want to be doing, knowing that I've lost friends
Mhm.
from breast cancer? What would I want to do? What would I not want to do? And I made some critical decisions
Mhm.
in that moment. Mine turned out to be non-cancerous. I
Mhm.
have, is it polycystic?
Okay.
Um, yeah,
Mhm.
that condition where you have a lot of them, but they're not
Okay.
cancer. Talk to us about that, because that was pretty scary for me.
Mhm. Yeah, it was, and I'm probably not the best person to be talking about this, because very early on, my husband and I, we talked about it, and I refused chemotherapy, and really, um, I did the surgery where they staged it, and they took out some of the nodes and that kind of thing. And I had a very good oncologist, but she is somebody who will work with you. And I said to her, I have researched cannabis therapy, and that is the way I want to go. And she was willing to work with me in terms of medication that she prescribed along with cannabis therapy. And that's a whole other story for a whole other
Mhm.
discussion. But that was, I did the surgery in 2017, in June 2017. And so far, I'm still cancer free. So, thank God for for that, and for the support of a very good doctor. So,
I love it. Thank you so much. So again, you didn't even go the traditional route, but now you're cancer free and you are here. So there is a story to tell. As you said, another interview could be done about overcoming breast cancer. But today we want to talk about surviving the loss of a
mhm,
child. And just the title of your book, You Gotta Get Up, Surviving the Loss of a Child. When we put this book out, a friend of mine, he said, "Can I get this book?" No, he wanted to buy a copy to give to a friend who had lost a child. talk to us about the title of this book and what it means to get up. How did you get to that place where you could get up, and just talk to us about that whole process and the naming of the book?
Before my son died and after my son died, I have, acquaintances or known of persons who have lost children. And honestly, that was my greatest fear. Like losing my son was my greatest fear. And I always, said to myself, if this happened to me, I would just go sit in a corner and die, because there's no way that I could get over this. Um, Honestly, that was my greatest fear. Like losing my son was my greatest fear. And I always, said to myself, if this happened to me, I would just go sit in a corner and die, because there's no way that I could get over this. Um, a few things after he died happened, but I think what stood out for me was the persons who rallied around, of the persons who rallied around, the persons that gave me really the will to go on were other parents who had lost children, who I knew either professionally or otherwise. And I saw that they had somehow managed to get back into life. These were people who, could laugh and and were living. And I also knew a few stories about parents who never made it back. They just kind of either got sick and, never recovered, or they became shells. And somehow, somewhere inside me, I felt that I didn't want to take this latter route. I felt like I needed to keep myself open. I needed to still become part of the stream of life, and I needed to keep going. And that was very, very hard for me. And in the book, I talk about an experience that I had where I had this, I don't know what you call it, but where I actually woke up one morning and something jolted me out of sleep. And I sensed or heard, I don't want to say heard or felt, because I don't really want to, it wasn't really in my, any of the senses, but something said, Wildfire has rejoined the host. And that's my son's stage name, because he was a musician. And I got up that morning, and I remember we had orchids outside, and there was this ordinary little white orchid. I don't even think it had a one of those fancy orchid names. It really was just a little white orchid. And I remember looking at it and seeing the most beautiful silvery looking texture in this orchid. And I said to my husband, you ever realized that how pretty this orchid is? And he's like, no. Throughout that whole day, I had this sense of excitement about me. And this was like a few weeks after my son hadn't been buried yet. And I had this sense of excitement. And I remember sitting in the car beside my husband and feeling this thing in the air, like something liberated, something loose that had and somehow in all of that, the understanding that I got was that somehow this was a return, and not just a return, but a joyous return. And what I felt was like it was my son, but it wasn't my son. This was a timeless, ageless kind of being, and it was returning to and it was so happy to return. But what I felt was the happiness of the others, and I really can't, the others on its return. And I realized at that point that return is joyous. And not only is it joyous, but it's joyous when you have completed the assignment. And I realized at that point that there was more for me to do. And I would not die. I would really not want to die and return without having completed this assignment. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that really was one of the things that encouraged me. I realized that there really is more to us and more to this than, and I needed to share that. I was being asked to share that. There is purpose. There's purpose to why we're here, and we need to live that purpose. So if we don't have the luxury of sitting down and giving up. Yeah.
The thing that got you to get up was this incident. What about your husband? Was he able to get up? How did he survive the loss of his child?
My husband, my late husband, because he passed in last year, January, had lost two children before my son. So my son was his third child. And after that, he would lose another son. And my husband was always the one who said to me, "You can't give up. You can't give up." And I don't know how he did it. He had the biggest heart. And so he was one of the main sources of inspiration for me, because he got up and he did what had to be done every day.
I am just so amazed at you. My sincere condolences. You have endured much, and so you are really a kind of authority, in a sense, unwittingly, on this issue of surviving loss. So what do you have to say to parents? Because at least here in Jamaica, there have been a number of accidents and parents have been losing their children. And so what advice would you give to them? What are the steps, the stages? I know reading the book they will learn more, but what could you say to those who are listening now in terms of how to get up? Since you're saying you got to get up.
Well, firstly, I would say that, I am so sorry that you have entered this club that nobody ever should have to join. It's when you see the joy that parents express about their children, the happiness at seeing them grow up and launch into the world, and how proud they are. The opposite is so painful. It's almost unthinkable. And so I never am trying to make light of this, because I know that this is pain. It's a loss of your own hopes and dreams for this person, and what might have been, if this person had lived to actualize their potential. And so I don't minimize it at all. I know this is painful. uh, and really, as I say, as a parent, when something like this happens to you, you have to make a decision. You have to decide whether you want to live. And it's not, I'm not being flippant about that, because a lot of parents don't make that decision. And as I was saying to you, when we were talking earlier, persons, it's actually documented in research that parents who have lost children tend to be more susceptible to illnesses and in years to come, because this is such a blow to the psyche. And so it it gives one pause. Your whole life, your whole identity is now in question and in focus. And this is not something that you're gonna, just get off and get over with. You really have to look at your life now and make decisions. And the first decision is, do I want to live? And I tell the story about King David, who, when he had that child with Bathsheba, and the very sordid circumstances around it, and the Lord sent the prophet to say that child is not going to live. And David was devastated, and he prostrated himself for days, and he wouldn't eat, and he wouldn't get up. And he prayed and he prayed, and the child died. And his servants are like, oh no, what we're going to tell him now, because he's already like flat out. And they tell him, and he, to their surprise, he gets up, you know, has a bath, has something to eat. And, they're like, well, why? And, he said, well, while the child was alive, there was hope. But no, he had to make a decision. And the decision he made was he needed to get on. He needed to get on with his life. And so throughout the book, I try to walk. It's almost as if you're starting a journey. And I try to walk this person through, this is a road that a number of us have walked. And this is kind of the way, the things you might experience. And one of the biggest fears for a parent, a bereaved parent, is that they're going crazy. They really worry about, whether we're going crazy. And you probably do go a little bit crazy. But what you realize is that the things you're feeling, we know about sadness and we know about crying, but there are other kind of physical and emotional expressions, like forgetfulness, and a simple thing like yawning, which I didn't even know about, and sighing. And I remember, for example, my boss pointing out to me that I was sighing a lot, and forgetfulness, lots of anger, based on how you lost your child. And so I try to walk um, the reader through these things and say, these are some of the things that you might experience. And, when is it that you need to probably get some help, because there might be a little bit more going on, but then a lot of it is just really normal. So that is a part of the and I really did a lot of research into the literature on this. And the other part of it is, how do I help myself? What are some of the self-care techniques that we can use? And so how we use breathing, for example, is a big thing. And there is a section in there with breathing exercises, interestingly enough, from another lady who had lost her young son. She's a yoga therapist, and she gave me permission to use an excerpt from her book. So, you have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself physically, and you have to take care of yourself mentally. And so it really is just, I'm not saying this is how I did it and this is how it goes, but at some point, your survival, you are going to have to make a choice as to why you need to survive. Perhaps you have other children. Perhaps there is something else that you need to do. And you have to make a decision to move. You want to move forward. Some parents don't. Some parents, um, the research shows that some parents, a lot of parents become susceptible to illness, in the years following their child's death. And I quoted a number of those studies in the book. Some parents even commit suicide. So it's not a light matter. It is probably the hardest and the heaviest thing you have to do is at that point is to make the decision that you want to live and to find your reason for wanting to live. And so throughout the book, really what I've tried to do is to share some experiences of some parents who were at the same point where you and I were, but they managed to find, find their why and move forward even with all the pain. And so that is something that I, really at that point I'm saying to you, this is the road that you're going to have to take. This is a long road. It's probably going to be a hard road, but in time, it's really, you might not believe it now, but it's not going to hurt as much. And there are days when where they're going to be better, good days than bad days. Everybody has to find their own way. But basically, what we're saying is some of these things are common to all bereaved parents. And so some of the things you're feeling, you're not going crazy. It is part of your grieving process.
Wow, that's truly comprehensive. And I really want to commend you for your courage and the fact that you got up. And it's not just that you've survived the loss of a child, you've survived the loss of a husband. And instead of, shriveling up and consigning your own self to death, you've chosen to get up and put this book together, turn it into a platform to reach out to others. And so I want to just commend you and just wish you all the best on this journey. Bamboo Sparks has been honored to have partnered with you in publishing this book.
Yes.
And when it just came out, it made the Amazon bestseller list. And I just want to thank you for just courageously sharing your story. And we believe that your book is going to bring hope and healing to many. And it's not just the parents, sometimes it's the auntie, it's the grandparents, it's the friends
Caregivers.
who are
Yes, the
connected
caregivers and the friends.
to the child. And so it will bring hope and healing. And it's a very practical book. And so if you don't mind, I just wanted to give the readers a taste of the book. Pick any section and just give us a little excerpt from the book to whet the appetite even more to get the book, because the title already is compelling and your story is compelling. But just give us a little taste of the book.
Before we get there, and I just want to say that, and it just hit me the other day that, a lot of times we think about loss of a child and we think about a young child, but I'm 60 years old and I'm still my dad's child. And so, when you think about it, it's everybody. It's not just, every time there's an accident or an incident, unless you're like 90, there's probably a parent who is grieving. It might not be a young child, but it's still the same pain. So I just wanted to talk about that. And then there are some issues that one of the things that in this section we talk about disenfranchised grief and look at some of the areas where you would expect to get support from the community and so on, but because of the nature of the death, sometimes it doesn't happen. And areas like, for example, if a child dies, if your child dies by suicide, and we have this kind of feeling, people have these feelings and these convictions about, about things like that. And so, we really have to bear in mind that, whatever the situation was, however old the person was, it is still a parent losing a child, and they deserve our support. My son Andre was killed in November 2009. He was 20 years old, beautiful inside and out, and was sure he was going to break into the music industry in a big way. The last time I spoke with him, he was all excited about entering a local music competition and had set his sights on taking it all the way to the top. On the evening of Friday, November 27th, my husband and I were sitting at home watching television when we got the call every parent dreads. A young man called to say he was a friend of my son who was at the hospital being treated for stab wounds after a fight with another young man. It's amazing how the world and nature seem to conspire against you in the grip of great tragedy. Firstly, after we pulled on some street clothes to head out to the hospital, the car wouldn't start. Then, when it finally started, we ended up in a horrendous traffic jam just across from the hospital. I remember sitting there too terrified to give in to my impulse to bail out and run the rest of the way. By the time we got there, he was dead. I remember thinking to myself over and over, what do you do next when the worst thing that could ever happen has happened to you? Looking back, I think it was that thought and my focusing on it that saved me. I guess every parent or anyone who has survived the death of someone really close asks some variation of that question. I don't think I've truly found the answer to my question, but it created a curiosity in my mind that gave me something on which I could focus during the darkest of times. There was another thought, I don't know where it came from, that somehow it was important to keep my heart open. Even in the depths of my despair, I sensed that there were two options open to me. I could close a hard shell around the pain I was feeling all the way from my heart to my gut, or I could force myself to feel the pain and remain open. I had the impression that if I chose the first option, I might never open up again. If you're reading this, it's likely that you or someone you care about has recently experienced the death of their child. If you are the bereaved parent, my heart goes out to you.
Wow, that was such a compelling read. And I'm sure viewers and listeners, you're now excited to go and get the book. It's on Amazon. It's also on the Bamboo Sparks website. It will be there up until June 2024. And we have a lovely picture of Lorraine here. And the book, You Gotta Get Up. She says she's 60, but she doesn't look like 60 at all.
I
She
just
looks
turned
very
60.
she looks very young. And so you could go to bamboosparks.com, and it's also on her own website,
Survivorsunlimited.com.
and it's empowering grief support. So there it is, journeying together through grief, find strength, healing hearts, building community. And this best-selling book is now available in hardcover, ebook, and paperback formats, so you can get it. And there should be a book launch this month, which is Child Month.
Going to be the 19th of May, the Sunday after Mother's Day.
Okay, so the 19th of May, you heard it here first. The Sunday after Mother's Day is going to be the book launch. And so if you're looking for a resource person, she offers retreats, professional development seminars, there are online resources, and the book itself, at the back, we have some resources, some help resources for you, those who are grieving, or that you can recommend to those who are grieving. So that's another reason to get the book. And her organization is called Survivors Unlimited. And she has been involved in this for over 15 years, dedicated to understanding the unique needs of those facing grief, especially children and teens. And then the book is really about the parents. Get the book and then contact her. If you've never lost a child, but you are a leader, an aunt, a friend, get a copy of the book. You can get it on Amazon, and soon it will be in a local bookstore here in Jamaica. As we close out this interview, Lorraine, do you have any final words for our audience?
One of the things that I have learned through all of this is the importance of just being kind to each other, because life is such a fragile gift, and we never know, you know, we tend to sometimes have airs and graces of about each other, or we harbor grievances, but life is so short. And so, I just always try to remind people that we need to be more loving and to be more appreciative, because you never know when it's probably the last time that you might see a loved one. And so, really, just try to reach out to those who need you and to be more forgiving and loving.
So once again, Lorraine, thank you for coming and courageously sharing your story, and also how you can be of help to others who are grieving the loss of a child.
Thank you for having me.
We trust that you were inspired by Lorraine's story and even the reading of the book, and that you will go out and get this book. You Gotta Get Up, Surviving the Loss of a Child, and invite Lorraine to speak or to do a seminar and to share from her wealth of experience. She's truly a champion. And so we continue to pray for her, and just want to encourage you to go get the book and spread the word. Just want to remind you of making many books. There is no end. Go pen it to win it and dominate entrepreneurship. This is Ruth Taylor saying, ta for now, until next time.